I'm here today with Twink Starr. It's August 28, 2006, shortly after 7 p.m. at his home at 2169 Lytham Road. Could you state your name, please?
Rupert, Starr.
And what is your ethnic background?
English.
And what year were you born?
1922.
And where did you grow up?
Mount Sterling, Ohio, a little town outside Columbus.
All right. And what is your earliest memory?
I remember a birthday party when I was very small. I thought when I was 4 years old or 5, whatever. But no, I remember, I'm not sure I remember anything before 4 years old, but I remember things at 6 years old.
All right. When you were growing up, when you were a kid, who were your heroes?
My dad and my mother.
How many siblings do you have?
2 big brothers.
How old were you when you first realized that you might be different than the other kids?
28 years old.
And how did that realization come to you?
Because I thought I was just adolescent like everybody else back in school, and that I was just a phase. And if I met the right girl, the right opportunity, then I could perform.
Where did you go to elementary school at?
At a little town of Mount Sterling, 1,200 population, a little farm community, the home of John W. Galbreath, John W. Bricker, and Twink Starr. As my mother says, not necessarily in that order of importance. But no, it's a small farm town, retired farmers.
Right.
And John Galbreath was a poor farm boy. He grew up there, and John Galbreath, John Bricker, was born in a log cabin and went to a brick one-room school for eight grades in Mount Sterling. And of course, he ended up being almost Vice President of the United States, our governor, etc., and our senator. But it was that small community had great influence. It was a wonderful community of wonderful people, including my mother, who was a senior high school teacher who influenced many of the people of the whole town. So I had a great background.
When you were growing up, did you ever hear other people talk about gay people or gay things?
Never heard about it.
Did you ever know anyone or know of anyone that was gay when you were growing up? Do you recall the first time you ever heard anyone refer to somebody as being gay? Or?
Oh, gosh. Probably in last year's probably my senior year in high school.
And do you recall what they said?
Well, no, but Bill Ray he had all these great guys, and he'd take them up to Columbus. They were all having great fun. Why couldn't I have some of that fun? There's nothing uncomplimentary or unkind about it. But there was nothing different from anybody else. It was just our adolescence, I thought. We all played with each other. We all had mutual masturbation. I never thought it was any different from everybody else.
You attended high school in Mount Sterling?
Yep.
And graduated from high school?
Yep.
And after you graduated from high school, what happened next?
Oh, I went to Ohio University to college and joined ROTC. And after 3.5 years, even went to summer school the last year. In 43, I went to active duty in the Army.
When you were at Ohio University, did you have any experiences or get to know any people who identified themselves as being gay there?
No, I was completely frustrated. I couldn't understand why I wasn't doing like everybody else. I had the most beautiful blonde for my junior prom, and we went out at intermission and had an ice cream cone instead of going up to the very hotel to the rooms. And I didn't understand what was wrong.
Did anyone else notice that you might be different?
No. I was head of my class. My mother was prominent. My dad was the little town dentist, but he died when I was 10. But I had great background, great brothers, and great community, very highly thought of. My parents were very prominent in town, and they were all poor, and everybody else was poor too in the Depression.
What was your major at Ohio University?
Science, business, Bachelor of Science in Business.
And did you complete your...
Yes.
Okay, and what degree did you end up with at Ohio University?
Bachelor of Science, and 4 years, and basically sales. I expect to be in sales.
Okay, after you completed your work at Ohio University and graduated, what happened next?
Well, I went to be an executive, a field secretary for my national fraternity of Delta. I traveled the country, 40 different colleges, helping the chapters do better jobs as a fraternity, and had a great experience talking to the dean of men of each college, and the president, even at Austin, even at MIT, whatever. It was a great experience. And then I left for work for Procter & Gamble, which I planned to when I was in college. I was recruited to work for Procter & Gamble as the next president, of Procter & Gamble, of course. But I had 2.5 years as a salesman with Procter & Gamble, basically in Cincinnati, then Dayton, and introduced Tide in Columbus and Dayton, and then didn't go any farther because John Galbreath kept wanting me to come and sell real estate for him. In 1950, I did.
How long was it that you worked, how many years or what time period did you work for the fraternity?
Basically 9 years of a school year. 9 months was enough, and they knew I was leaving. But I've been acting fraternity ever since. And,
so was it during that time period that you came to realize that?
No. I would say I realized probably in Dayton as Procter & Gamble in the 40s, 48, 9, that maybe I wasn't just adolescent after all. And I had a girlfriend there that I could not perform with, and I kept thinking, well, gosh, it's the wrong situation, but I need someone that I love, and if I find her, I'll know that I'm okay. And then I came to Columbus, and during that time in selling, I found in my old one of my old high school, my old college girlfriends, and she followed me to Columbus, hoping to get me to marry her, I guess. And so I finally realized when I was 28, when I came to Columbus, that this was going to be it. I was going to realize that I was gay or I was not, and because I found a girl I wanted to marry. And then it didn't work out because I couldn't perform. And so, fortunate, and we continued great friends, etc. But then is when I realized that I was gay.
During this time period when you were thinking about your attraction to men as being maybe just an adolescent phase or that you hadn't met the right person yet, did you ever discuss this with anyone else?
Nobody, ever.
Wow, that's a big burden to carry around all by yourself.
I needed, things might have been a lot different. But my mother never said, oh, you've learned that from so-and-so, And I had a fabulous mother and a wonderful mother, 2 great brothers, and but it was all, the adolescent, the Boy Scouts, they showed me how to jack off, and so this is just normal. And one of my best buddies still we play around, and 2 or 3 of the guys would play around, but there was no serious sex and stuff. Never ever kissed anybody. It was just adolescent stuff. So I didn't think I was any different than anybody else.
Sure.
And it took me till I was 28 years old to realize that maybe I'm something different than adolescent. And then when I had the love affair and met the girl I wanted to marry, she had everybody in the whole family come in to meet the new husband. And then I had to, but we're still good friends. She was a wonderful person, and she was great. But then I met Alan.
Ruination of his life.
Okay, so tell me about what happened after you came to the conclusion, all right,
Okay.
I must be different, I must be gay, or whatever.
Okay. I always liked, I liked women. I liked well-dressed ladies. I had a great time. It was what I expected to be. I expected to have a wife and children, and I always wanted to be active in the community affairs. I wanted to be important. I wanted to make money. I wanted to be a leader in the community, both in community service and in income, and particularly more than the income, just acceptance as a good guy, because I had this feeling of inferiority. And I think that was done because of realizing perhaps maybe I was gay, and there's all these awful things about being gay, and I thought, boy, if I'm that, I can't do that, and I'm going to overcome that. And so when I came to Columbus at 28, I was going to prove that I was just as good or better than anybody else. And so every organization I belonged to, I became president. I excelled in the real estate business. One of my best friends that brought me into the board only for the first step up the ladder to be president, made the statement, says, I think this is just because you're my friend, you're not going to be president. And I says, well, I'm not. No, why? Well, you're single. And so I said, uh-oh, he doesn't mean I'm single, he means because I'm gay. And I thought, right then, to hell with you, buddy, I'm going to be president of this group. And I was, 6,000 members. They elected me, and never had any static, and I was always highly received. When I realized that Billy and I were not going to be married, and I went to a psychiatrist, and I thought, I'm not going to kill myself. And he asked me that. And I says, no, that's not it, but I want to be cured of this. And so after these sessions, I told him, he says, no, I brought you to the Y of the road. You had a choice to go either right or left, heterosexual, homosexual. What the hell are you talking about? You haven't done anything except me accept this. And I said, I think I do accept it. And I said, I felt kind of happy. And so then I left, rented an apartment, and I needed furniture. And I went to the Howard Brooks Interiors, and here was this fantastic guy going to sell me some furniture. And so the psychiatrist said later, says, well, now, what's going to happen when you get your apartment full of furniture? What are you going to do then? Are you going to stop seeing this guy? And he tried to make me realize, you see, face up to the fact.
To a bigger place. Yeah.
That's it. I said, well, no, he's taken all my money, and I seduced him a couple of times, and I said, well, I kind of like buying this furniture. So that's how we got started. But with the coming out and realizing what was going on I was 32 years old by then, and it was really, I had a great job with John Galbreath, and I was not having any harassment as far as, well, I wasn't one, but Danny Galbreath let me know that he knew I was queer, and in front of people, my psychiatrist's son, who I only saw the psychiatrist for a short time, his son, and Danny at a big party at Darby Dan's says, well, hey, what I say his name was, here's Twink. Twink, he could be your first customer, first patient. So I knew that he knew.
So tell me about the first time the two of you met.
Oh, I might start crying or have a fit or no.
It was in a bar.
Right. Well, when I came out, when I realized what was going on, I had a little apartment. I had a room in a half a double, paid $1 a day, starting to sell real estate in 1950. This was after. This really was part of that time. This was 1950 exactly, when I was still going with my girl. But the top guy's son at Galbreath tried to seduce me, and he was my first blowjob. And it wasn't really, because I had it 4 years later in Chicago. I refused to admit it. I never thought of it until years later. I said, hey, wait a minute. This wasn't the first. I had that before. I completely put it out of my mind. I wouldn't allow it to think about it. I went to get some furniture, and this is before Allan, and I went to Lazarus. The decorator I had was another little guy, and he had a partner, but he was the first one to help me decorate my apartment, and he then came out and seduced me, and so then I went to realize that I'm gay, And so I went looking for a companion, and down at 21, Club 21,
Yes.
it was the hangout for college kids. Phi Kappa Alpha particularly was down. And I went in the bar, and here was this gorgeous guy sitting at the bar. And I sat at the table because I didn't want to get close. And so I went up to the bar and sat next to him. And there was another guy on the other side. So who's going to take him home, the guy on the other side or me? Well, the guy on the other side had a wooden leg. And so Alan said, the only reason he went home with me was because this guy had a wooden leg. True or false?
True.
So I was kidding. He says, well, thank God I didn't have a wooden leg. But he was so pretty, I could just sit and look at him. That's all, just to look at him. He was so pretty. And so we went home that night, and we made out, which was unbelievable nothing. But he was a great kisser. And he kissed like nobody's business, I always said. Kissed like nobody's business. But anyhow, that's how I got started. And I kept buying furniture, and then I realized that wasn't it. Then we started dating, and that's a story that you'll ask about, I'm sure. I couldn't be, he was an interior decorator in the 1951 and 2 and 3. Hairdressers and interior decorators were obviously gay. Everybody knew it. I didn't want to be seen on the sidewalk in Columbus with them, so I'd take it to Cincinnati for the weekend. He's putting up with this, I can't imagine, but it's true. Anyhow, we had, the first gay bar, I was in Columbus, and I thought, well, I've never been to a gay bar, I've got to get a gay bar. So here was the Frolics on High Street, about just this side of the Chittenden, which was gay, street next to gay, north of gay. And the front was a bar, and the back was Gray Entertainment, and very straight, and so forth in the back. The front was gay. So I was walking down, and I said, oh, I want to go in the gay bar. He said, oh, no, you don't get in here. Never been in here, and so forth. So I walked up to the bar, sat down at the bar. This little girl came up and said, what would you like? And I turned and said, oh, hi, Alan. You want the usual? This is a guy who never been to a gay bar. This is all true. And that was the thing. And now, in back of the bar, those places, they had Madame Rose Brown, a black gal and a little piano, and she had a pianist, and then she'd sing. And the favorite song was Handyman. He's my handyman, and it was a straight song, supposedly.
Brings Mama a little piece of ice every day.
It was great. So that was my introduction to the gay life. And then I'd see some of my straight friends, in fact, I was at the Fox, says, oh, they have a date band back there, don't they? I said, yes, we do. During this time, when I came out and when I acknowledged and did this, I met Alan, and I said, I'm never going to live, I'm never going to expose myself. I'm not going to be completely closeted. And then Alan we went to Cincinnati for New Year's, and which we'd done the year before, and we had a little apartment on Hudson Street upstairs above a house. He had the upstairs apartment, a little story and a half on Hudson, and $60 a month, if I remember, and a nice cat. Anyhow, he got cat scratch fever, and in my apartment.
I had a cat. I bought a cat at the Humane Society that was sick.
Right.
I thought, well, I'll get it cured. Well, it scratched me on my thumb, and that became infected.
So he had encephalitis, brain fever.
Wow.
And the doctor said, Mr. Starr, he has a 50-50 chance of brain damage. And I've told him ever since, boy, you sure got it. It's really bad. But that day, and that January the 2nd, I said, I took him to the emergency room and so forth, and I called his dad and mom, and they diagnosed this, and I said no, and I called the Ohio State University Hospital, and I said, I'm sales manager of John W. Galbreath, and I says, I want a second opinion on a man's brain, and he came out of the hospital. bitched the whole time. Here he is Sunday morning coming out here doing it, and his dad and mother got a bill of $25, and where'd this come from? I didn't say a word. But I wanted to make sure he had the proper thing, and I used Galbreath anytime I could, his influence, and worked. But Alan, and then I said, I'm going to have to live my own life. I love Alan, and if there's a situation where it's life and death, 50-50, who cares about anybody else? So I bought a house, and while he's in the hospital for a week, I came in every day, and he don't remember ever me being there. I brought him a Life magazine, he'd look through it, and that changed his face. I even brought my mother out to introduce him because I thought, this is my guy. And mother was very nice. She knew what was going on, never mentioned it. She knew about me being gay before I did, but she was wonderful. And so after Alan got out of the hospital, we moved into the house in Lincoln Village where I was selling for Galbreath. Mr. Galbreath owned all that land out there, and he sold the Westinghouse, and what was left over to build Westinghouse, he sold to Murray Lincoln at Nationwide. They built Lincoln Village, and I sold it. And so Alan and I lived together for 10 years in Lincoln Village. And I had a roommate, Don Miller, great guy, great, wonderful. And he'd go home for the weekends to see his girlfriend, so Alan would come in for the weekends. And so then when I bought the house, the three of us moved in. And Don had his bedroom, and Alan and I had a bedroom with twin beds. The carpet was worn out quickly. But then he left, went home, and Alan and I lived there for 10 years. And we moved here, and this year we've been together 52 years.
Wow.
We bought this, we moved in the Ides of March, 1955. And if you remember Caesar, beware the Ides of March, Brutus. Well, I didn't pay any attention. I moved him in anyhow. So we've been together ever since. We've been roommates and been lovers. We love each other, but we haven't been lovers. And he's gone his way, and I've gone my way. And now, after 50 years, we have the companionship and the friendship and the love that keeps us going.
When you were talking a moment ago, you talked about the first club that you went into. Did you say it was called Frolic?
Frolics. The Frolics. It was on High Street.
It hadn't been there for
No, it's been gone
50 years.
But it was a little this side of the Chittenden Hotel, this side of Spring, Gay and Spring on the west side of the street. And the bar was long, and in the back was a nightclub. And it was a very popular nightclub. They had some good things. And it was more straight than it was gay, but the front bar was gay. And then the Chittenden had the round bar.
the Oasis.
The Oasis, and that was a round bar.
The Chittenden Hotel. Do you remember
Right.
that?
I recall the building.
Do you?
Okay.
It was an interesting building.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, but but then immediately after that was the best bar was the Trade Winds, which that was on going up toward the train station on the right side, and that was our hangout for seeing our friends, and that was our Cheers bar. But from the very beginning, the first bar, see there I denied that. The first bar I was in, I never told Alan, was when I was at, just as I first realized what was going on, I finally got the nerve to go to the bar underneath the viaduct of Mound Street.
Well, I didn't go there.
Oh no, you were too sweet for that.
Very low class.
No, it was only gay. It was the gay bar of Columbus. What the heck was the name of it?
I don't know.
Have you heard of this? Okay. This would have been 40s, and I was in high school.
He wasn't born yet.
No, of course not. Much later. But in high school, I graduated in 1940. This is in the 30s. Blue Feather. The Blue Feather. At Mount Sterling, 1,200 population. Bill, his father was my father's best friend, one of my father's best friends. And Bill was single, and he was taking some of the high school boys up to this bar called the Blue Feather, and never took me, and I was kind of jealous. But he was supposedly was. Now there might be my first feeling about gayness. You asked me that before, and I didn't answer it right, probably. But no, then as a senior in high school, I had my first beer Never been to the graduating week in high school. But the Oasis was fascinating. Well, when in 1953, as president of the board of the Junior Chamber of Commerce, I was president 53, 54. It went from July to July. One of my buddies got married. He's Bob Holmes, later judge of the Ohio Supreme Court. He and Jenny got married. I went to the wedding and had all the champagne, and I felt I was completely a mess. And they were getting married. All my friends were getting married, and here I was queer. And so I said, I'm going to the Oasis. So I went to the Oasis bar, sat at the bar, and I was so proud because one guy over here was sitting, had half a beer. Some guy came in and talked to him. They left without even having to finish the beer. And so the guy on the right of me talked to me, wanted me to go home with him or something. I said, okay. So he says, well, I've got to go to the bathroom. Come out and we'll leave. When he did that, I shit my pants. And so I immediately left, went home. That was that. I was so excited. And so I didn't have that experience. Then nothing happened until you heard the rest of it going to Frolics, or me now. But the Trade Winds was a great bar, Sensenbrenner, and I was on television with Sensenbrenner because I was president of Junior Chamber of Commerce, and here he was trying to close down my bar. But it was a great place to meet people and make out, and of course I didn't have to because I had out. But we had 10 years in Lincoln Village, and in '65 we moved here. We've been here since. And Allan, as far as he's concerned, he did a degree in fine arts at Ohio State in interior design, and he worked for Howard Brooks. That's where I met him at Howard Brooks. Had a wonderful, wonderful company, and he has a story about that, being hired right out of college, and he came up in a suit and clothes, and they said, oh, you don't need that. He said, I wear my suit and clothes? No, just come in. He was hired to drive the truck.
Deliver the furniture.
But he became one of the top decorators in Columbus, rooms at the Decorators Museum and so forth. And he worked in Helen Sniffle in North High as manager of the store. First, before that, he was in charge of Flick's 5 stores, interior design for each store. Had changed the whole store around in beautiful windows, and Bob Glick was done. They were all great Jewish people, and they gave Alan a great opportunity, and they were so proud of him. And he did beautiful things for the store. And then Monday night, he had to work Monday night only, and so we'd meet. I'd come downtown and go to the men's stores and shop and so forth, and we'd meet for lunch, for dinner at Kenning's restaurant, and we'd have the same drink every night and the same food practically. And he'd go back to work and I'd go home. But that was a great experience. That was the start of my gay life, basically. And but we had some good gay friends, and I'd buy a house in Lincoln Village, and it was empty, and I'd throw a party. We'd have candles and some music and some booze and dance and carry on. And but it was generally, basically, the social life was of friends.
How did gay people meet each other during the 40s and 50s? How did you find out where a bar was at, or how did you tell that somebody else might be gay, or what did people do to meet?
Well, that's why the gay bars have been a big part of the gay life. That was the place where you were obviously gay, and so that you didn't have to worry about exposing yourself, which was a disaster, and that you felt relaxed, and you could basically. I don't think, where else did we meet, Alan?
What?
Where we met, if you knew where there were, I heard about Club 21, where the college kids were, and that when Bob Davis went there, and he says, oh, it's kind of
my
kicky.
fraternity went.
I know, but they weren't all gay.
No, they weren't gay.
Of course, your president was gay, but you're gay. You had a couple of gay friends in college, in high school, college, which I never did, but you did in college. Bob.
Well, I didn't know that though.
Oh, you did at the time?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
He was the drum major at Phi KAA, and they're all gay. You know that.
No, I didn't know. We didn't carry on.
Oh, come on, you told him to put his dick in. The guy that ended up being president of Galbreath, he's the head of FHA in Washington, D.C. He was your president of your fraternity, and you were harassing him. You were giving him a problem. Anyhow, he knew he was gay. He forgets. But anyhow, where did we meet? Basically, it was rest stops. Yeah, rest stops. There's a part. Be very honest about it. That was a place, and that was back then. That was not that like it is today. There were rest stops were few and far between, and people that generally stopped there didn't stop there just to rest. They stopped there for a reason, and particularly if they're out of the way, like one between Columbus and Harrisburg was a little on the side street there. The farmer would come down and look out and see what was going on inside the John. I would say that if you knew hairdressers and you knew interior designers, there was a lead. If you, as far as my experience in high school, why, gosh, I had 3 guys that we'd play with each other, and I couldn't. I had asthma, so I couldn't play. So I was manager, and I remember having a couple of the guys in the locker room. By that, having them back then, it didn't suck, but anything. We just mutual masturbation back then was just coursing around, and that was it. And as I say, the Boy Scouts showed us all how to masturbate, and we all stood around and watched them. We all went back to the cottage and all masturbated each other, and that had nothing about it, you know. This is all I'll talk about. That's why I just was adolescent until I was 28 years old. I don't know how else to say it, just by trial and error. The radar at that time, gaydar, we didn't call it that then, but I suppose that was there.
You talked a little while ago about when the two of you first moved in together.
Yeah.
What was the reaction of your friends and family that the two of you were moving in together?
With my family, I thought, what a nice partner you got, nice person. Because I had Don Miller first, who was straight and nice, an attorney, and a nice guy.
It wasn't unusual for 2 men to live together when they were young.
In the 50s.
Yeah, my family thought he was fine, and we played cards together, and you know.
He didn't think I was a very good card player. But
what?
Your dad didn't think I was a very good card player.
He said he had to carry this heavy weight here. My mother and I always won when we were partners.
40 years later, I finally came out to my brother, who's a doctor. Had him in the car going down to see my aunt who was dying, and had a 3-hour drive, so I had him captured. And I came out to him, and he's a veterinarian, medical school, and all that stuff. He said, I thought Alan was gay, but I didn't know about you. And I thought maybe, but I'm not sure. And so I joined him, and he says, well, how do men have sex? And then the next thing he asks is, do you really eat shit? And this is my brother, a doctor. We're 70, 60 years old. He's been thinking maybe I'm gay. He thinks Alan's gay. He doesn't care to know anything about what gay's about. He doesn't care anything about what my problems are. And my older brother, a year and a half older, who I took care of, got him out of jail, paid off all these bills. He was a redneck. I said, don't tell Clayton. Well,
he loved me.
He ended up.
We just think of you as part of the family. He was always so nice to me.
He was always having me married, and he was making gay jokes. Get that fairy off, that ballet dancer. Get that fairy off the screen. And then I told Hugh, don't tell Clayton. Let him enjoy himself. Don't worry. Well, he went ahead and told him. Next thing I know, Clayton's telling me things that I know he knows. But you're different, so what? I love you being different. You just keep right on to it. He was my best buddy.
That's fantastic.
Isn't that interesting? My brother Hugh, the doctor, studied medicine, all this stuff. I couldn't believe it. And he says, well, it's a choice. I said, Hugh, it's not a choice. Listen to my story. You know BJ, you know I was in love, blah, 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 blah. no choice. And says, I don't want to ever talk about it again. Fine, I said, I won't. So, 3 years later, you're always talking about all this stuff. I said, what are you talking about? I said, I've never mentioned it. He said, oh, you're talking about these Reverend evangelical Christians and all this borderline. I said, well, now that's true. But I'm not talking about my sexuality, about my gayness. But I said, I'm not going to stop talking about that. It's wrong. It's not, the civil rights are not right, and so forth. If you don't like it, tough. You're going to do it. And so then I find out that my nephews know all about it. My nieces know all about it. Could care less. And Alan's mother and father died, but of course they knew what was going on. They never mentioned it. And but Alan was oppressed as a kid because his older brother was the athlete and the greatest runner, and he was pushed down, and he couldn't hit the ball right, and so forth. So he suffered through secondary child. Big brother was wonderful, and he's not from his father, but they reconciled, fortunately, and had a good time together. But my family is great now, no problem. And my two nephews, they know. When our 50th anniversary came 2 years ago, I said to my brother Hugh, the veterinarian, I said, you know, Alan and I have been together for 50 years.
He didn't say anything.
And he didn't say anything. And I said, no, I'd like to have a little party. And I'd like someone to give it for us. He didn't say anything.
No.
So I said, Hugh, would you like to give a dinner party for for Alan and I on our 50th? We've been together 50 years. And he changed the subject, started talking to somebody else. And so I said, well, thank you, and now I know where you stand even now, after all this.
You just
so my nephew, Dano, has a nice party. And my nephew in Seattle, he and his wife and the two kids are fantastic. All my nephews are great, and they're all wonderful. And it's Uncle Alan, and we have a great relationship with 12 nieces and nephews. He has no relatives whatsoever, and hardly any friends. But I'm kidding. No, but we have each other, and that's it. But he has nobody whatsoever. Everybody's died.
I have no relatives.
You mentioned before, you said your mom knew it before you did, and she knew it first. What do you mean by that, and what makes you think that?
That's a good question.
I never heard that before.
A conversation with one of her friends from Mount Sterling, said, well, the lady was kind of being nosy, I assume, and said, what's with Rupert? Why doesn't he have a wife? And he says, well, I've heard, she said, mother, he's had 2 or 3 very nice girlfriends, and they've had a nice relationship, particularly with Betty. And he says, but he never settled with any of them, but he settled with Alan, and he seems to be very happy. And that's enough.
Was the psychiatrist that you went to speak with the first person that you ever told that you might be gay?
Yes, I believe it was. Dr. Richard Curtin and his son. He was a very well-known, he and his brother were both well-known doctors, and he was a psychiatrist. And Burton, Richard Burton. And I went to him, and we talked about suicide, and I said no, that was against my religion, but I wouldn't have done it. And then he brought me to admit to the fact that, like I said, you get your apartment full of furniture, what excuse are you going to use then? And I said, well, I guess you're right. I am using that excuse. And so that was great.
Sounds like he had a pretty healthy approach.
Very good approach. Good man.
Because I've heard other people where they go and the doctor tries to change them or has them undergo like conversion therapy or whatever.
He said he was going to change me, but then he realized, he admitted, when he said, you're at the fork of the road. I said, all you're doing is getting me accepted. And I said, well, you know, he said, well, give me a chance. And I said, well, I think you've done your job. And I think I'm going to enjoy being gay.
I've spoken with a couple of other people who have told me some stories about the police and their attitudes towards the gay community. Do you recall any bad experiences, either that you had yourself or that you heard about other people having with the police?
Well, in coming out and meeting Alan before we moved in, acknowledging the fact that I was gay, being afraid that being active in a very prominent position with John W. Galbreath Company, leader of the community, finding out what he would think if I were exposed in the papers as gay. So I had to leave town. I'd go to New York and have sex. And I enjoyed all the shopping, enjoyed the things, and I was making good money. And in 1952 and 3 in New York, if you get a typical bar, there would be a policeman in the. If this one bar in particular was kind of a long bar, it was a small bar, but it was obviously enough that I knew where it was and heard about it, and probably a gay newspaper, and it was there. And if a policeman was in the bar, and if you put your arm around or showed affection to a guy, he would arrest you. So you just sit there and talked, and then you might get up and leave together. Nothing you can do about it. But as far as New York, certainly had great bars. I remember particularly RSVP with fantastic singer, and she recalled later, says, "Oh my, Twink, you're an old timer. You can do one of my first singing assignments." And but to go to New York was a release because no one knew me, and I came back home and be president of the Junior Chamber of Commerce or whatever, or what I was doing in the Board of Realtors, church, and so I often felt that I was restricted, particularly in the 50s when I was Junior Chamber of Commerce. I told the psychiatrist, I said, here I am out trying to promote myself and making everybody to know me as every week, luncheon for over 100 up-and-coming leaders in the community, and then here I'm sneaking around with my sex life, and it was very frustrating. And what was your question again?
I was just curious about...
Police,
yes.
That was it. As far as Columbus is concerned, no. At the Galbreath Company, we were in the Buckeye Building between Gay Street, and in the back alley we had parking. And if we'd come back from the bar up there on the High Street and come back and sit in the car, and we were sitting in there necking, and we had a flashlight, and there was a policeman and catching us necking. And I rolled into the window, and I said, my name is Starr, and I'm sales manager John W. Galbreath. This is our parking lot. We're here just resting.
You said, we own all these buildings, Johnny. That's what you said.
You remember that?
I do remember that, yes.
Well, I was important.
Well, and you won the policeman though, and he believed
And he left. Other than that, I had no. We used to go to the Chittenden Hotel at $3 a night. Pick someone up at the bar and went to go to Chittenden, and as far as the Junior Chamber of Commerce, I would have meetings, luncheon meetings there for 100 of us and so forth, and the manager. And here I got off at the 3rd floor, and here was the manager on the 3rd floor with me, a little guy taking to his room now. And said, hi there, and go over it, and pay attention, because there's a gay bar in the Chittenden, the Oasis.
I've heard stories from other people about the police sometimes raiding the bars, like around election time, trying to...
Never had that happen.
I was never any of those, no.
Because we went to Club 21 most of the time,
Only at first. The club plan did not allow. We went to the one up on the over the railroad tracks is where we went. That was the one that was popular. We went. The 21 we didn't. After I picked you up, I don't think we went back one time that I went with you. Now you may have gone other times, but I did go there, and Nick rose up somehow. Orrin Huntington.
I've done an interview with him.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but you know all about his part. That he would have big parties, make money, charge everybody, and he'd have a floor show, drag show, and so forth.
At the ranch?
The ranch.
Are you talking about like the 50s?
Yes.
Up in Delaware County?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the first time I knew about being gay, supposedly. And this was the 50s, you see. And Orrin was on the front page of the newspapers, being arrested and so forth. And Orrin's a friend. That was just unbelievable to think that this was going on, and I was so closeted and didn't know what was going on. And here these people have to have parties. Then I read about black tie dinners in New York. I thought, boy, that is really something. And now we have a HRC in Columbus with 750 people, you know. But back then, that was right out of the fiction books, you know, like the story of O, etc. And Orrin was notorious and would be arrested for those parties for no reason other than just getting together and having a drag show. My knowledge. Back then, that wasn't drugs back in the 50s. It may have been some drinking, but nothing great. Drinking wasn't that, to my knowledge, wasn't that big even in college. I would say, of course, in college they had a lot of good parties and stuff. But no, I had no real experience with that. But I would say this, that as Alan mentioned, we were very reticent, very conservative. We went to dinner parties or groups of friends, but the bar up there was kind of a hangout as far as being gay, and that was good. And we did have there was a lot of after bar parties back in the 50s and even the 60s, and you'd come out to have an after bar party with drinks and stuff, and maybe some carries on in bedrooms or whatever. But we never participated in that, to my knowledge. A little bit. I did. He didn't.
Were there any clubs or organizations that either were for gay people or that just were dominated by gay people?
I wasn't into that. Don't know. I'm sure there were. We were the conservative part. We weren't the flamboyant. We didn't really like drag. We did, and I still don't particularly care for it. But we had no. Back in those days, though, I knew no groups. We just had little cliques where you might have 8 friends and take turns having dinner or drinks.
Other than the bars that you named, were there other places like restaurants or nightclubs or anything like that people gathered in?
Well, in New York City was the East 55, which even Arthur Godfrey mentioned on his program, and he was the great television guy. And it was the most elegant restaurant with block wallpapers with gold fir-leaves and beautiful waiters and great food. And there were important people there, well-known people. And when I went to Columbus and went to New York Al and I went to New York. I was assistant sales manager in charge of Lincoln Village sales. And I went to Mr. Galbraith's New York office and to see his partner, say hello, and to get tickets to the pajama game, which Mr. Galbraith got for us, in fact his partner got for us. And his secretary, Mr. Galbraith's secretary, and Mr. Ruffin's secretary. So the two of us together, and out in there, apparently, and I talked to her, and I said, well, now, what the direct command, and she says, the East 5-5. And I said, she knows immediately we're gay. Yeah, New York, typical New York. Great guy. So I didn't say a word, so said something else. So that was the East 5-5. And, but in Columbus, there were, one was the Lincoln Hotel on East Broad Street, and Harvey was the bartender, big bold dyke, and she would give the gay guys oversized drinks. Sometimes wouldn't charge her for them, and I think there was some kind of an entertainment, like piano. But then there were certain bars like that catered. The Christopher Inn, which was the round hotel, had a nice bar for after work. There would be interesting people there, including a lady judge who finally ended up being thrown out because she drank too many martinis with us at the Christopher bar. But it was not a gay bar per se, but it was no gays in those next gay bar. But we had a number of gay bars that came and went, and you've probably heard them all. But
were there special places that women went to, or did the men and women go to the same clubs, or how did that work?
My understanding was the women had a separate bar.
I never.
No, we didn't see them much. They had their own bar, and just I didn't know where that was until later years, or which ones were which. But I think there's 3 or 4 now. But at that time, I know that they had a place to go, but I don't know what it was.
When you were going out occasionally to these various clubs, would it be a mix of different age groups and different races, or was it pretty much all people of the same age and race, or how did that work?
What's the answer, Alan?
Well, it was all white. I didn't remember any black people.
That's true.
Mostly younger, I would say.
True. Very true. There might be some, later in the 60s, there would be more mixed with a lot of lesbians. There were a group that liked to go out and hit black people, and there was a bar out on Mount Vernon that had great entertainment, and they had a great floor show. They had a bar downstairs, and they had a bar upstairs with the entertainment. And Deloise, I remember, she was there. Have you ever heard of that name? Mm-hmm. Deloise. But a couple of our friends, Timmy's and Professor from Ohio State, liked binge, and so we went out there this one time, and they saw the professor and Tim come in. Here we were the hustlers, and that's the only time I remember of being with black folks.
Do you recall what the name of this place was? You said it was on Mount Vernon Avenue?
Yeah, but it was a well-known nightclub, and it was very, very well represented. It was basically back what the nightclubs would have a lot of white folks too, like Galbreath or someone similar. So they would come to hear her. But and I remember being down to Bill Enke and David and you and I went to the bar downstairs and sat there having a drink, and a black man came up and said, how dare you come in here and sit with us? You don't allow us to sit in your bars. Why you come over here, run over here?
I don't remember that at all.
Of course you don't. And the owner or the man in charge came over and shooting him and says, you're completely welcome, come in any time. But there was resentment at that time, and I appreciate it. It didn't bother me because I agreed with him completely.
All right, I think we've worked through the questions. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you wanted to tell, a story or an experience, or?
But that's one of the problems, I think, of young kids today. not knowing what's going on, not having any buddy to help them through this, and how wonderful it is that this has changed a lot in the last 10 years, if not more. But some of the things that I've been working with, groups that are doing that for kids, and people that are throwing, it's amazing how many young people are hanging around, their parents throw them out. I can't believe that. And it's much better than it ever was. But I'm just fortunate to have a good family and to have a good job. And I didn't have, and it's interesting the fact that in 1955, I moved Alan into a house, interior decorator. I came out of Grande. And people says, well, and some of the JC guys said, boy, you're sure strong in doing this, and so forth. And I wasn't sure what they were talking about. And I looked back later, particularly one guy, that he was later I found that he was very knowledgeable and very open about his knowledge of sexuality, and his sister, I think, was gay. And so, but I thought, well, he knew, and some of the others knew. And it's just like when my minister brought me out in my church, and after I was head of the church and so forth, and I said, oh, I'll be darned. So I went back to two of the members of the executive committee where I was outed, and I said to Judge Rick Pfeiffer, I said, Rick, I understand I was outed at the executive meeting. He says, yeah. He says, I went home and said to my wife, did you know Twink Starr was gay? And she says, no, I didn't. Said, go wash your hands, dinner's ready. You know? Then I went to another top insurance guy, but still very, very active in church. And they've been so good to us, taking us to the country club for dinner and so. And I said, well, I understand you're out. He says, well, Twink, we always thought you were, but you and Al never mentioned it, so why should we? And he says, makes no difference. And so I was glad he did out me, because I've been outed and out myself, but I didn't ever want to really come right out and admit to it. And coming out completely has been very good for me psychologically. Being more relaxed, and if only everybody would come out, all my married friends, etc., gay, if everybody would come out, our problems would be over. There wouldn't be any discrimination. There wouldn't be all this crap of religious, fanatical, so-called religion, really Christians, so-called Christians, I call them. I'm very active, by the way, nationally, and don't ask, don't tell. I'm on logcabin.org, 3, 4, 5 pages of my story, which I've been telling you. You want to read it. Also on logcabin.org, if you look down at the bottom, American flag, and it says Liberty. Click on that, and it goes to Stories XPOW. And you click on that, and there's a 4-minute video of me and my military and my coming out. And the national meeting last year in New Orleans before Katrina, I was featured at the luncheon and given the award, which is up on the thing here. This year in Washington, at the national meeting of the Log Cabin, Republican, Bishop Gene Robinson of the Episcopal Church was featured, and he got the award I got last year. So I had a nice time with him, and nice time with Andrew Sullivan, and a whole bunch of great guys, great people. But I'm on the national blog every time, and I have been very open with my, even at YMCA men's camp this weekend, I said some things I maybe shouldn't have, but I came out there to the head of the camp, and she's going to look at Log Cabin also. But it's just great that you're doing this, and this is going to help all the more, and the more people come out and understand what's going on.
Looking through the pages of time, 82-year-old Rupert Starr of Columbus, Ohio, examining an old scrapbook, revealing his memories from World War II.
I grew up from a boy to a man in the service of our country.
These faded words begin to tell the story of Starr's courage and sacrifice.
Every day after I was 21 or 22 years old has been a free day. I should have been killed. I had every opportunity day after day and overcame so many things, strafing, bombing.
Starr joined the ROTC in college, ended up as a second lieutenant in the Army, sent to Europe in late 1944, just as the Germans launched the Battle of the Bulge.
I rather was enjoying the whole thing up until they started shooting at me and trying to kill me.
When German soldiers surrounded Starr's regiment, he volunteered to go behind enemy lines, trying to restore communication with division headquarters.
Why did I volunteer? Well, I was a soldier. I was an officer. I was a second lieutenant. It's my job. Why not? They expected of me. I expected of myself.
After 3 days behind enemy lines, Starr became a prisoner of war.
I was mad. I was mad that I thought I should die instead of being captured. I've been always guilty about being captured. I shouldn't be, but I have been.
Starr's mother received this telegram after his capture.
The Secretary of War desires to express his deepest regret that your son, Second Lieutenant Rupert D. Starr, has been reported missing in action since 16 December.
Starr was taken to a German prisoner of war camp. The Nazis gave every prisoner one of these mugs for their daily ration. They marched him to several different camps. Along the way, Starr witnessed the horrors of war.
The agony of it all, so much devastation. Bombs ricocheting off of the sides of the hills, buildings blowing up. We were in the midst of it.
After several months as a POW, Starr and the other prisoners were liberated by the advancing Russian army. Starr will never forget seeing an American flag for the first time as a free man.
No better sight. Good God, it was beautiful. And then we went on, and here was the Liberty ship with a big American flag flying. And we thought, gee, we've made it.
Starr's courage earned him a Bronze Star. His ordeal as a prisoner of war gave him the courage to come to terms with his sexual orientation.
And then I met Alan, and we've been together for 50 years.
Starr says his own experience shows why gay and lesbian Americans should be allowed to serve openly and honestly in our nation's armed forces.
Gays and lesbians should be looked at no differently from anybody else. They can do the job just as well. They can be just as professional. They can be just as strong, just as much courage, just as fine a soldier as anyone else. Courage is the important thing in combat, in fighting a war, not your sexual orientation.
Starr begins every day by hanging the American flag in front of his house, a symbol of freedom.
It's just great to be alive and be American.
The Stars and Stripes flying high, thanks to heroes like Rupert Starr, Americans who answered freedom's call.